the Nightmare Box presents The Art of Wargaming. I'm Yaga Malark.
And I'm Thumbs.
And Oni is unfortunately unable to join us tonight, and Thumbs is actually going to be joining us as a permanent member of the team, because Oni has been a trooper. I think I've told you guys before. He has been an absolute trooper this entire time. He has been trucking it over from another town in Montana. Now, those of you in California or from the East Coast will be like, oh, the next town over, you know, that's 15 minutes away by freeway. What's the issue? This is Montana, so...
Yeah, I love you, buddy, but I would not drive over a mountain every week to do this.
Yeah, bless him. He's been having to do passes to do this thing. So, like, I applaud his efforts. I am thankful that he was able to do as much as he could, as long as he did. He finally told me that he needs to take some time to get established and be doing what he's doing, and obviously there's no hard feelings, and he's going to be coming back when he is able and as he is able, but I enjoyed having Thumbs on so much the first time that I figured that we have him on too, and then when Oni's here, we get to have just a party. We'll just have a party down here and wake the whole house up. It'll be great. So, yeah, again, shout out to Oni. Thank you again for your hard work. We look forward to seeing you soon, bud.
Love you, buddy.
So this week we're talking about the 9 types of ground, which is slightly different than terrain, as we were talking about last week. Terrain is a bit more of a fixed idea, whereas the 9 types of ground, abstract.
Yeah, it's... Are we on the mountain or are we on the plains?
Right. Are you talking about terrain or...
Well, kind of both, but...
Yeah, and I mean, they can be a lot of different things. I mean, as we saw with the last episode, some of the different types of terrain that we were talking about had a lot of different interpretations, depending on the situation they were in. You're going to find the same here, but the idea is a little bit different. Last week, it was more about the terrain in relation to motion, is what we were talking about. Terrain in relation to motion and into moving between and engaging your opponent on that and what that looks like. When we're talking about ground, that's more how you're engaging your opponent at the time. Sorry, I spaced out there for a second. Dot. Look around at the cat. Cat, do you know what we're talking about? Cat didn't know what we were talking about.
Cat doesn't know what we're talking about.
It's probably for the best. I would not want my cat to know much about war or military science.
All of humanity would be doomed if Cassius could do that.
If that and opposable thumbs between those two advancements, we'd be done.
Curse is foiled again.
But when we're talking about ground, when you seriously say it's good ground, it's in relative terms to the enemy, and it's not so much motion. Moving across or motion towards or away from. It's more in terms of if you're engaging your enemy on this ground, or if you are actively on this ground, what does that mean in terms of your troops, their troops, the dynamics involved. Mm-hmm. I think that's the difference we're dealing here. Again, this document is well over 2,000 years old, and Sun Tzu might be kicking around in the afterlife and be like, that is not what I meant at all. Quiet
Sun Tzu
down
listens
to
your podcast, huh?
He obviously does. I mean,
his name is basically in it.
This is obvious plagiarism. He's gonna come back from the dead and get me. Yeah, I know Sun Tzu. I know. So that's kind of the differentiations there. And then we're gonna talk about an excellent battle that I think sums up, and again we're talking about this idea of force multiplier, terrain as an idea of force multipliers, and using ground and terrain as a force multiplier. It's going to be another theme for this episode, so I think that Frederick the Great will help us demonstrate that at the end. But Thumbs wants to be surprised. I'm sure you guys do too, so let's get through the rest of the intro, and then we'll get into the meat and potatoes of this whole thing. So I had an amazing night fight recently. And Thumbs, who is not as well schooled in Warhammer 40k...
I have no idea what a night fight is.
Might ask me what a night fight was. It's Warhammer 40k, as I already alluded to, and those of you who play Warhammer 40k will know that the large Lord of War units for the Imperium and Chaos are called knights. A night fight is just when you tell your buddy beforehand, I'm bringing a bunch of knights, and they bring some knights, and then you'd have a good old fight with your knights. And the benefit to this...
So would that be like using Gazigul Elthraka in the orcs, or like big hero characters is what you're saying?
No, I'm talking, if you turn around in your chair right now, I've got a Stompa on the thing back there.
Okay.
See that big old guy?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a
Cool.
knight. It's a Lord of War, but it's like a knight, the orc version of a knight.
Big boys, giant robots. I get you.
De Biggins. So yeah, I've been enjoying that for two reasons. One, knights are really cool. I know in the meta, it can be really a toss-up of what kind of list you're going against with a knight list, whether or not you're going to be successful. But with this Chaos Knight list that I've been running, I've been feeling like it is just a very nice build in of itself. I feel like I can engage whatever I need to engage with it fairly effectively. Now, I haven't been against every single type of list, so maybe there's a Gene Stealer list out there that I cannot handle because I just didn't know to prep for it.
They're coming for you.
But yeah, so I had a really good fight against War Master Sumatai a little bit ago, and the fight went pretty well in my favor. It was a good fight, I recall, and then just there were a couple key clutch rounds that went towards me, capitalized on what was going on and moved. The problem with knights using them is that, I mean, they're colossally powerful. I know I need to get you into a game of 40k at this point. I'm gonna get Thumbs to play a couple games of 40k with me, and maybe some Kill Team, so that when I'm sitting here talking about it, he's not going completely glassy-eyed over there.
I can have responses other than okay.
That's neat. What's that? But the awesome thing about knights is they're usually very powerful. They have a lot of high-powered weaponry on them. They're good in melee combat. They've got a lot of life. They've got high toughness. So you've got a lot of good perks to having a knight. The downside is they cost a lot of points. So every single knight that you have is a really big point sink. And so if we're talking about let's say a guard army that has 200 models in it, and then I bring my knight list out and it has 6. Same points, but mine is considerably smaller. Now, they're very powerful. If you don't have the things to deal with them, they can just stomp all over you.
But if you lose it, you lose so much.
Right. You lose your big... If I lose my knight Castellan or my knight Tyrant, that's 700 points. Just gone. Mm-hmm. Just gone off the board. That's nearly half my army that just went poof. So it's a big deal.
What's your point levels at, like 1,500?
I typically do 2,000 point matches.
Okay.
Those are that's fairly standard for the ITC in most areas.
When I very briefly played Warhammer 40k like 10 years ago, we were doing like maybe 1,000 point armies because we were all just starting to collect.
And when I was first starting, or any time that because I've got 7, 8 armies at this point, I've lost count. But every time I've started a new one, I'm low on points. That's when I'm doing the 1,000 point matches and 1,200 point matches, whatever. But as soon as I can do a 2,000 point match, I like to, because I like having options. I feel like having a 2,000 point list gives me the ability to put plan Bs in the list.
Well, and for something like a night fight, it actually makes them doable,
right?
Because if it's a 700 point army, you're not doing anything else.
No, that's just the one. Yeah, okay, we're doing a 700 point match. Okay, I'm bringing one knight, just the one.
This will be fine.
And it saves on my back too. That's the other big issue. Is every time I do my orc list, I love playing orcs. I mean, I have about a 50-50 win ratio, maybe a little better with orcs. They're not as good. I'm not as good with them as I am with my other stuff. I just like playing them. But yeah, it's terrible on my back because there's so many of them. So you're sitting there moving them, every single one of them, just 5 more inches, 5 more inches, 5 more inches.
Yeah,
okay, we're charging now. Okay, 12 more inches.
And the problem is when you're doing the swarm, you have to deal with the swarm.
I've got to get trays. I've got to get the movement trays at some point. I just it's the next step for me to be able to play some of my swarm armies that I have. But with knights, you don't have to worry about that. You move, it takes you 5 seconds to move your models, and you're like, okay, cool. Now we move on to the shooting phase.
This game's going to go 4 times as fast.
Exactly. At least if everybody's using knights. I've definitely been where I bring my knights, and then I don't know what Kaji's going to bring tomorrow. We've got a game tomorrow that I'll tell you guys about next week. But yeah, so my night fight was fun. I enjoyed myself. The other thing we want to talk about before we get started into the meat and potatoes of this episode is the idea of who these shows are meant for. We're on episode 11 at this point, and I honestly don't. I know a few of the people who listen to us because you've reached out to me, and I appreciate that. But I wanted to kind of clarify as to who I and our fellow co-hosts intend this material for.
It's good to have a mission statement.
It is, and I'm not. I know we've been over this briefly a couple of times, but I wanted to make sure that I guess I stressed it. When we're talking about gaining an edge over your opponent, when we're talking about manipulating the field of battle to your advantage, heck, even when we're talking about whatever is giving you the upper hand, what we're not talking about is cheating or rules bending. I intend this material for people who are rules abiding, who enter into this sport in good faith with their fellow combatants, with their fellow participants, that you're going to abide by the same rules, you're going to abide by the same code. And this isn't the quote-unquote honor thing that we talk about, not stabbing people in the back or whatever. That's legal within the game rules.
Will Wheaton has a internet rule. Like, the law of the internet, according to Will Wheaton, is don't be a dick.
Don't be a dick.
And that's kind of what we're talking about here. Like, if we're on the field and your back's against me, yeah, I'm going to take out your back, but I'm not going to be...
I'm not going to try to bleed you. And the other thing is, obviously, like, we have a light call. If you play Belagarth, and I don't know if this is the same for Amp-Guard, but I know that it is for Dagger here and for SCA, where we have a hit calibration, where if something just doesn't connect right, you say light. That doesn't mean that scale slides. Like, it shouldn't matter who you're fighting against. It shouldn't matter if you like the person or not. It shouldn't matter if they're your friend or your enemy, your unit mate, or somebody you don't know, or somebody, again, none of these things should matter. It should be the same across the board. If I notice that I'm taking hits that are considerably lighter than everybody else around me, actually, I like that. I don't mind that so much at all. But if I'm the only person in the realm or at the event who has to be hit a certain way to take my hit, I'm a cheater.
Yeah.
At that point, like that, you're playing a different game than everybody else is playing, and that's just not cool.
The closest I'll come to, like, changing how I take shots is when I'm fighting brand new people. I'll be more likely to take a shot that I wouldn't otherwise. But afterwards, I'll usually be like, hey, man, you need to hit just a little bit harder. But if I'm facing you or Kaji or Turkey or whoever, I'm not going to be like, well, I like Turkey a lot, so I'll take his shot.
Right, exactly. No, and it has nothing to do with that. Like, it's about honoring... We're entering into a contract. This is one of the few things that we have as human beings that actually matter. It's a social contract in which we agree to act a certain way in order to achieve an aim together. It's a community thing that is the most standard of human operations, and it is so essential for us as a society to function. Cheating goes against that fundamentally because you are breaking that contract by going fundamentally against it.
Yeah.
So that's just not what we're talking about here. And if we're not going to abide by the contract, why are we bothering gaming anyways? Why are we bothering having foam on these weapons if we're just going to say, you know what, I'm going to take what I'm going to take? Fine, let's just
hit each other at that point. That becomes way less interesting to me. I'm sore enough with foam.
Right. Well, I mean, like, if we're using, like, real weapons is what I'm talking about. Like, let's just stop playing. Like, if we're not going to agree to something. So, like, that's where it is for me. If we're entering into this, it should be something good faith, and it should be something where we're trying to accomplish something together as a community. Train, build each other up, practice skills, and it needs to be done in good faith. So that's all I'm going to say about that for now. Yeah. That was the other thing on here that I wanted to talk about. With thumbs being on, and like we had talked about last time, the other huge thing about what makes these communities work, what makes tournaments in Warhammer 40k and in Belagarth work, is volunteerism. And we're not talking about giving up your entire weekend, your entire
No, we're
vacation.
talking about making sure that no one has to give up their entire weekend.
Right. Because if there's very few people volunteering, that means that the few people who do usually get sucked into a lot more.
We've lost a lot of really good people from burnout that way.
Oh, totally.
Of just people who are like, I love you guys, but I just don't have the emotional energy to
Because they're
do
givers.
all this. Yeah.
They're givers, you know. Anytime they see a need, they're like, oh, I'm going to fill that need. And then they realize that the entire week-long event or the entire week-long tournament, they've spent it working. And not getting
The
paid
first
to do
time I
so.
helped run a Chaos Wars, when I ran like the field and the tourneys and everything, I basically worked 10-hour days for 7 days straight on my days off. And I had fun and it was worth doing, but like I could do that once.
Right.
And I'll put in a bit of hours every day, but like I need to make sure that I have me hours, and the best way for that to happen is for more people to have volunteer time.
Like I said, this is something I require of my apprentices, and
Oh, yeah.
I recommend it for everybody who does this, an hour of volunteering, or a shift of volunteering every day, or one shift for every day of an event. If you want to get them all out of the way in one day, if it's a 4-day event, and you're like, you know what, I'm just going to spend this whole day at Troll. I'm just going to spend the whole day checking names and taking money and getting people into the event. Awesome, you did that, and then you get to go and enjoy yourself.
I actually used to have a slightly different view of this, because I used to have the idea of like, new people shouldn't have to volunteer.
Oh, I think it's really good for them to volunteer.
Well, and that's where I was like, new people shouldn't have to volunteer, they should enjoy the game, get that love in, and then put their time in. But I'm deciding that I was wrong on that. And not like, you have to volunteer a lot, but just start with that idea of everyone helps out and everyone gets more out of it. So it's really intrinsic. So it's not what has to become a learned behavior of being like, oh, do you need a herald? Oh, do you need a...
It still is a sense of ownership. Mm-hmm. You know, we all make this community work. We all make this community function. We all make the event happen. And if everybody pitches in, it makes it way easier for everybody else. And I agree with you. That's a good lesson to learn early.
Kind of ties back to what you were talking about a few minutes ago of just really emphasis on community.
Right.
If everyone's volunteering a little bit, and then everyone's also getting to fight really hard on the field, and then going off and not having like, oh, you didn't volunteer enough.
Right.
Get in the way of the community around, or you volunteer too much, or whatever.
And people have weird days. Like even when I try to keep up with the standard, like I'm talking about. Like I remember one of the last Battle for the Rings I went to, they put hay down, and that's...
Oh yeah, if you're going to poison yourself, don't do it.
I'm not smacking anything about the staff. I mean, they had made a decision that they had to make at the last minute. It is not usually that wet in Southern California. If anybody else was there, it was the year that it just like rained nonstop for like the first 2 days. It was like there were rivers.
Flood for the ring.
Flood for the rain. I mean, it was nice because any of those events are way more, again, community based. You end up going to camps you wouldn't normally go to. You're sitting there smoking cigarettes or having drinks with people you wouldn't normally have met, and that's all pretty cool. But you went there to not be rained on. But with what they did, because it stopped raining, but the ground was still super wet, and so they put down hay. And my normal thing was I would go and do weapons check. That's my volunteer thing that I can do. I go and do weapons check in the morning, and then I'm off for the rest of the day.
But it's a little hard to do that when you have hay fever.
Right.
And the weapons are covered in, guess what?
Hay. The only, I didn't actually bring my allergy meds because I was like, I'm going to the desert where I don't have any allergies. I'll be fine. And then the only thing they had was Benadryl, and I was like, I can't function if I'm sleeping.
Yeah, I wouldn't have even thought of it. I would have been like, it's January. Why would I need my
Right.
Claritin?
Right. So it was. There's obviously exceptions to the rule.
Don't
I tried
hurt
to do other
yourself
things.
with volunteering.
I tried to herald as to make up for that. But yeah, none of these things are hard and fast rules. But if everybody gives a little, it keeps a few people from having to give a lot.
Think of it as like the PBS model of gaming.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good way to think about it.
With less tote bags.
And you meet a lot of cool people doing it, too. Some of my best friends in Belagarth, I met while doing security, especially when I was younger and I stayed up later, and I was guaranteed to stay up later. I'd do security, and I ended up meeting the coolest people doing the late-night security shift.
Security is a really good one if it's an event that you haven't been too much and you want to like get a crash course in the area.
Very much so. The same thing with trash pickup. I know that's not a super glamorous one, but
People love you.
There are a few people who are more praised or more appreciated. Like you go around doing trash pickup, people see you that night, they will absolutely usually offer you a drink. They'll invite you into their camp with open arms because you're the person who made their camp less stinky.
Bellegarth life hacks.
That's right. These are these little social currencies that we're telling you about. Trash detail. God, it's so noisy when I shift in this chair.
Oh, it's a recliner.
So yeah, that's our little spiel for today. Anything else before we get into the...
No, I think we're pretty much set here.
All right. Well, let's talk about then the 9 types of ground. And, of course, these types of ground and how they relate to wargaming, because the needs and the descriptions are going to be different based on Warhammer or Bellegarth, because they are a little bit different in terms of how you play them and how you approach the field and everything along those lines. So the first one that we're going to talk about is dispersing ground. And this is in your own territory. And Sun Tzu says that you should try not to fight in dispersing ground, and you should focus on binding your army together with a common purpose. And what I think about for dispersing ground is, at least in terms of Bellegarth, you haven't even gotten on the field yet.
Yeah, don't fight tripping over your own tent.
But think about the edge of the field. When your realm or your unit is getting formed up to go on to the onto the field. Mm-hmm. Or when you are in camp and you're trying to get everybody motivated to go onto the field. Now, I've been in larger units before where you'll get everybody together, and then there'll be a delay for whatever reason. The higher-ups will need to chat about something or confirm the time of something. Or,
yeah, nothing ever happens perfectly on schedule.
Right, but then you'll notice that a few people wander off. They've wandered off to take a smoke break, or they forgot something at their tent, or they just need to do something real
I just got to go
quick.
get some water real fast.
Yeah,
that one has ruined me many times when I've been headed to the field.
Because as the name of this type of ground implies, dispersing means that your troops are more likely to leave and go back to where they came from. And so the idea is to try to get your troops on the field onto the field quickly. Don't delay on the side. Don't delay in camp. If you're trying to move together and maintain that motivation. It's very easy to lose it unless you're a very disciplined group. I know groups that when they go to the field, they're expected, like, because it's the unit fight, they always fight together. There is absolutely the expectation that everybody will be there. They've all been told to be there. There's not going to be a whole lot of worry there. But most units are not quite that militaristic in their approach. And so the risk of losing people to quote unquote desertion is very real.
Actually, at the last Chaos Wars, the Gelf had a conversation basically about this, of like making it a celebration of going to the field to get people out there, like get some of the non-com fighters to come too, or not, some of the non-coms to come too, and like bring things to like cheer with. Like they even talked about making a little like Chinese dragon in the shape of the Gelf snake.
See, that would be cool.
That would be so good.
Everybody else would have to up their game if you guys did that.
Well, and start doing that, and start making it fun to come to the field, and making it so if you do stop to get some water or something, you don't have to wander all the way back to camp, but like right there.
There's a little station or something.
Yeah, the more you can keep people around the field, the easier it is to keep people on the field.
And this is all binding together with common purpose. As you notice what Sun Tzu said, you're saying it exactly as well. This marching together, or making it fun, or having the things that you're going to need there. That's something that I've noticed with the Brotherhood of the Falcon. They're very good about making sure that all the weapons, the water they'll need, the shade that they're going to need, the chairs that they're going to need.
Yeah, they come prepped.
That's already all there and ready to go.
I'm like, well, there's a tree with some kind of shade over there. I can sit on a root. That'll be fine.
As a Dark Angel, I love the fact that the Brotherhood are triad, because it means that
You can just mooch.
My lazy butt can just roll up and be like, "Hey, cousins, mind if I snag a corner of your
How's
shade?"
it going?
Because you notice it, everything else be nice and orderly, and then like the one corner of their tent will just be this pile of Dark Angel shields. And we love you guys. We just want you to know that we love you and we appreciate that. So again, dispersing ground. It's easy to linger. It's easy to get left behind. It's easy to find better things to do. So move out of it fairly quickly. With Warhammer 40k, think about this as the time before you work up the motivation to glue your models together, or to do your paint project, or to do your, or even schedule a game. I mean, I know that for me, the longer I go without scheduling a game of 40k, the harder it seems that it is to schedule a game of 40k, because it's, I don't know, like,
you get out of the habit.
You forget how to initiate the conversation. Like, I don't know what it is, but so this dispersing ground is also can be a state of mind. It's working up the motivation to go and do the thing. It also works for Bell. If you're talking about a garb project or a weapon project, get out of that dispersing ground. Don't stay where it's comfortable. Bind yourself together with this purpose and move out.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I didn't think I was. I thought that was going to be a hard one to talk about.
You're doing solid here. I'm very proud.
I meant to ramble about that one. So, anything else to say about dispersing ground?
Not really.
Oh, yeah,
I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Mm-hmm. Go do the thing.
Go do the thing. So after you're in dispersing ground, and again we're talking about in terms of relation to the enemy, comes slight ground. And slight ground is a short way into hostile territory. And Sun Tzu says that you should not halt here, but keep in a close formation. So when you're thinking about slight ground in terms of the Belagarth field, if you think about the halfway point of the field, literally as you approach that or have crossed that halfway point, that is slight ground.
What I was thinking of is, you see it a lot with new people. They will, like, take their step, and, like, halfway through the step, they'll be like, oh, I don't know if I want to do this, and, like, falter. You see it with them throwing shots. You see it with, like, 4 of them moving forward, where there's that point where they recognize that if they go farther, they will engage, and they hesitate right there. Or even that makes it real easy to, like...
Not just new people.
Well, yeah, that's true.
Anybody who loses... Because even the Sun Tzu says here, you got to keep that formation. And when we're talking about formation, it doesn't necessarily have to be everybody who's going left, your left, right, left. No, or it's just maintaining that line, maintaining cohesion, which is a necessity in Warhammer 40k, but is a good thing to do in Belagarth too, which is to stay within good distance of your allies, supporting distance.
Yeah, close enough that you can help out when something happens.
Or be helped.
Exactly.
You don't want to be in a position where you're like, well, I got swarmed because I was 2 steps further than I should have been from the nearest shield person. Well,
you can always tell when you take 1 step too far. As the spear right there, you're like, I'm good. Ah, no.
Well, you know, because somebody starts to look real hungry.
I've made a terrible mistake.
That shield must start. Hobbit is looking hungry. Dang it, I'm too far out. So yeah, this being a short way into hostile territory, and you want to keep up that momentum. Remember, in dispersing ground, you're working up that motivation to start moving. You're keeping everybody bound together in purpose. In slight ground, you're maintaining the momentum. Do not halt. Keep together in close formation. This stuttering thing that you've talked about, I've also seen it in 40k, where somebody will get close to the opponent and then they'll hesitate for whatever reason. I see it all the time when I'm playing AdMech. Somebody will be charging my Castellan robots, not actually charging, but they'll be moving in toward my Castellan robots or moving in toward my onagers, and then toward the last minute they decide to, like, move to the side and, like, not actually charge. It's like, why wouldn't you just follow through? Like, my dudes do not do well in melee, and so you not coming in.
I think even in gaming, people have this natural urge to avoid the idea of getting hurt. Like, you're aware that this could hurt, and so you hesitate for a moment. You have to actually kind of, like, train yourself to, like, nah, it's a game. Even if it does hurt, I'll be okay.
Right. I mean, yeah. But the fear of being hurt is absolutely there. I hate to quote Fight Club because, of course, Chuck Palahniuk did not mean that as a guide to life. But once you figure out that you're not made of glass, it's a lot easier to do things. And I don't know, after I took my first really good red hit to the head, and it didn't kill me. I mean, it smarted. I can't tell you that it didn't smart, or it didn't ring me real good, but I survived it. And yeah. I was, I wouldn't say I was no worse for wear, but it's one of those things that after you realize that you're not delicate, and some people come into it already knowing that. They've already done martial arts, or they've already done some form of fighting, and they don't have that hesitation. But for the rest of us, pointing at myself, like I winced for the longest time. Every time somebody would throw a shot, I'd close my eyes. How in heaven's name are you supposed to block a shot with your eyes closed?
The first things I teach people is, like, don't close your eyes when you're throwing the shot, and don't pull your head back, because that's the other thing. People like look away.
Right.
And don't put your shield in front of your face, because if your shield is in front of your face, you can't see what's happening, and they can't see what's happening either. And headshots both ways, just quadruple.
It's an easy thing to want to do because you want to protect your head, but you're not actually protecting yourself when you can't see. And when your eyes are closed, like I was saying, you can't block a shot that you can't see coming. I love feinting people. And some of the easiest people to feint are when you throw that fake high cross, they close their eyes, and it's like, okay, cool, I can move wherever I want to now. And you don't know where it's going.
Yeah.
Because you're not looking. And that works out for me. So the same thing is with this momentum. Don't hesitate. In the face of the enemy, be bold and continue through, and do not halt in this slight ground. Yeah, anything else to say on slight ground?
It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I think that's pretty straightforward. Contentious ground is the next one, and this one's a little contentious in definition as well. It says it's of equal benefit to both. But do not be too hasty to attack. Instead, bring up your rear guard. So I would say that contentious ground would be if you've got two large forces that have not quite gone against each other yet, and they both have perhaps lost momentum looking at each other, and you've got this big area in between, about 3 sword lengths most of the time, that has become contentious ground at this point. May not have been 15 seconds ago, but it is now. And it's of equal benefit to both to move forward or to be aggressed upon. So don't go in for the direct attack, is what Sun Tzu is saying here. Don't be too eager to be the first out into that dead space, but make sure that you're reinforced. Bring up your rear guard. And
it kind of tracks back to an old idiom of you're not really guaranteed victory unless you can have half again their numbers.
Right. Or 10-1 is one of the things they talk about.
Yeah, I remember that from the last chapter we did. It's too easy for some small thing to go wrong, and suddenly your even numbers are not even numbers anymore.
Right.
And then even if you win, you've probably lost so many people that if there's another group there, you are hurting. You're not really able to go on full strength.
And at worse, if you've got this contentious ground, and let's say again, let's extend this definition to say contentious ground, meaning not just equal ground itself, but equal numbers, equal strength, like everything is equal. It is contentious. It's a contentious situation. Worst case scenario, you obliterate each other, and you've left an opening that your opponent can exploit. Because not only, like, you took away as much strength as they did. That's not winning. That's attrition. and
attrition has never worked out well.
Unless the numbers are on your side. And in this particular case, Sun Tzu is saying in this situation, the numbers are not on your side. Because we don't have just more bodies we can constantly throw at it. Unless you're doing a regen battle, in which case contentious ground might not be as a big of an issue to you. But if you've only got the one life in the game type, or if this is Warhammer 40k and you've only got the one army or the one unit, don't be too hasty. I know we were just saying in the slight ground, move on through.
At some point you got to fight, but be smart about where you fight.
But contentious ground is one where you're not going to gain a clear advantage. It's of equal benefit, which is, say, no clear advantage, and you're always trying to play to an advantage in these situations. That's always the end game, is to have the most advantages, because at that point you don't have to actually fight as hard. If you've got the force multipliers, right? It helps that out. Yeah, I think that one's fairly straightforward too.
That's a nice thing about Sun Tzu. Once you explain it, it actually makes a lot of sense.
It does. It does.
There's a reason it's lasted for, what, 2,000 years, you were saying?
More than that, because I mean, this was. I keep forgetting when this was written. I've read over it 10,000 times, but this was. It's over 2,000 years old because it was back in. It's here somewhere. This is from somewhere. Oh no, it's not even 2,000 years old because this is written somewhere between 960 and 1279.
Okay, it's still like 1,000 years old, though.
Oh no, this version of the text is from the Song Dynasty. It was written. Warring States.
476 it says.
475 to 221, somewhere in there, because of what he references. It was likely written during the Warring States period. Thinking about you, Rama. Romance of the Three Kingdoms. See, I didn't forget it. I got it tattooed on my forehead.
It looks really funny.
I got it in like this really like loopy lettering, very calligraphy-esque.
It's artwork.
Who's that rapper with all the face tattoos?
Post Malone?
That's the guy. I'll be the new Post Malone.
Oh, buddy.
Oh yeah, I spits hot fire. Okay.
Moving onwards.
Open ground is a lot like it suggests. Access and egress is equal to both. You want to maintain communications and look to your defenses. Most Belagarth matches will be taking place on open ground.
Yeah.
And it might shift back and forth as to whether or not it's contentious because of where people are, but most ground that we do battle for is open ground because it's selected for that.
Yeah, we tend to do big flat parks.
It's the easiest thing. You don't have to worry about people running into things. You don't have to worry about sprained ankles or tripping or anything along those lines without the obstacles and hazards. Now, that being said, some choice events, I'm looking at you, Ragnarok, Armageddon, right? You guys got them forest battles. A lot of you Easterners enjoy your woodsies.
Thawbral's a small northern one, but it's got a
Thawbrawl.
great little field for...
It's in Idaho.
Yeah, Idaho Falls.
Idaho Falls
or
area.
Near.
Cat. Oh my God. He's back to his thing. I know you folks have probably been missing Cassius. He's been really good the last couple of times and like sleeping during the recording sessions. Not tonight. He is
A little playful.
very excited to see Thumbs and wandering all over the place.
It's
getting
a
into trouble.
two-way street, though, buddy. You stay over here.
Yeah, you're not near the wires. Don't go near
Not
the
that
wires.
much of a two-way street, but...
So in this open ground, like he suggests, you're maintaining communications. And in Bell, obviously, we don't have runners going back and forth. We're not large enough to account for that. But you want to maintain just communication with your allies. You want to make sure that everybody's on the same game plan. I know that one of the best things to do is as we're approaching a line, I'm going to turn to the people to either side of me and let them know what I'm about to do.
Yeah. People who, like, charge the other line and then don't tell your partners, like...
That's a suicide run.
Yeah. I've had multiple people just be like, hey, bam, push the... Well, why didn't you follow? Well, because I didn't know you were going to do that.
Flanking maneuvers work best when you've got someone to fix the corner, somebody to roll a shallow flank, and then somebody to roll a deep flank.
Wide flank.
Yep.
Deep flank.
If you've got those three people, and again, you got to communicate. The timing has to be right for these things to work, because if somebody goes up, fixes the corner, and the flankers aren't moving, okay, cool, fixed corner, whatever. Flankers are moving, not a fixed corner, okay, the corner turns back, you've got a whole new front. It all has to move together, and to be able to do that, there has to be communication, whether that communication has happened beforehand, whether it's a familiarity with fighting styles because you just have fought together so darn often, or whether it's because you turn to the person next to you and say, hey,
I'm gonna do a thing.
I'm fixing to do this. Don't just Leroy Jenkins.
That's the perfect reference there. Yeah, that very much explains that.
I know you guys know what I'm talking about. You guys have seen this Leroy Jenkins character. Just don't be that guy. It's not the guy you want to be. And this is the same thing in Warhammer 40k. But instead of communications, we're talking more about the continuity between not just your individual pieces, but between units and in your bubbles. Look to your defenses and make sure that your bubbles aren't getting too far apart. I cannot tell you the number of times I've started off with a really good Zneech Demon Bomb. I've had all my heralds where I need to increase that strength. I've had my demon prince in there to be doing the rerolls on ones. I've had my big Lord of Change in there to make sure that the morale is on point. Like you've got that going on, and then you start to approach the enemy lines, and it fractures. You got one group that starts to head toward the enemy, heavy units, and then some are going toward the infantry, and suddenly these bonuses that I've put together are no longer functioning because everybody's too far apart. Sun Tzu is saying, keep it together, look to your defenses, maintain that communication, which is to say maintain that cohesion, and you're going to be just fine.
Mm-hmm.
From your response, I think we're ready to move on
Yeah.
to linking ground. And this is another one that is dependent on the situation. And it's when he says is when you're bordering 3 states. And you want to form alliances and strengthen those alliances at the same time. Now, I think there's a couple of different ways we can take this particular one. When you're looking at the field of battle, if we're thinking about a unit battle, a realm battle, in 40k you don't typically have fights between multiple people, but occasionally you do have a carnage match, I suppose. Not in a tournament situation. But sort of unit battle, not necessarily alliances, but I know I very rarely will form an alliance with somebody who's right next to me, because that's where I need to move.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the best things you can do, and like we were talking about in previous episodes, you're generating those relationships, you're talking with people, making it with those little fireside chats that are so important, and maybe the next day on the field, I'm in my unit, you're over there in your unit, and I happen to catch your eye, and I look at the unit in between us, and you look at the unit in between us. We nod at each other. I turn to my unit, say what's going on. You turn to your unit, say what's going on, and suddenly we have multiplied our numbers.
Yeah, if there's a group that outnumbers me in particular, I'll look at the person next to me and be like, all right, you go left, I'll go right, and if we meet in the middle, that's fine. But
Exactly. So on the field, this really works on account of the fact, because you can, again, if there's a group that's outnumbering everybody else, you can maneuver against them and make your numbers count for more, and make it so it's not just a numbers game. I've been to too many events where just the largest unit won every single time because they would just wait for the smaller units to get into their infighting, reduce their numbers, and then just walk around and roll up the field.
yeah, there was especially it was kind of in the meta for a little while at Chaos Wars to do super groups. 2 units teamed up and suddenly they just
Right.
outnumbered everyone else. And it kind of fell out of vogue in the last couple of years just because it wasn't fun. Like, everyone got stomped but one side that won without trying, so number game get real old real fast.
And it's also cool to win with your side. Like it's one thing to, like I was part of Team Quetzalcoatl the one year, and that was a lot of fun. But it's also cool to be out there and be like, you know what, my team won this event or this tournament or whatever it was. Now I've never really been in a unit that's done very much of that. I mean, the Dark Angels are great fighters, and I'm very proud of my unit, but we are not overachievers. Now that might be changing. Some of the new blood is really wanting to have more of a field presence.
We've got a similar thing. We're starting to, we used to be really good with field presence, and then we got comfortable.
Yep.
And we still hit hard, but we weren't as, always there. And it's part of what we were talking about the dragon earlier, of trying to relearn to, be there, and more importantly, be seen being there.
Right. Yeah, because you want to have a reputation for that. I mean, if you're a fighting unit, there's some units that don't particularly care about that because it's not their focus, and that's cool. But if you want to be a fighting unit, you want to make sure that you're seen, your colors are seen out there, because this also can help with this linking thing. If you're a constant presence on the field, if people know you're a known quantity, you can be depended upon, they're going to work with you more likely. This also works in the abstract, like when we're talking about larger in terms of realms. It's really good to form alliances and good relationships with your brother and sister realms. The closest realm to us, basically, the closest large realm is Wrath.
There's Wrath, and then there's up north, there's, what is that? That's, oh god, my squire goes there. I'm going to get in trouble for not remembering the name. The Idaho Falls one, the Araduoth? No, that's
down in Utah.
That's Utah, and I always get it mixed up with Ebenhold?
Yeah, that sounds more like it. That sounds more like it. Yeah, so the Idaho.
The Thaw people.
Yeah, they're about
sorry,
6
Theon.
hours. They're about 6-8 hours away from us, and we like to really try to attend their events and to support them and help them out. And they make a huge effort to come up and attend our events. Bless them, because
Yeah,
we're so
when
far
we're this
away.
far away,
They're the only ones who typically make it up.
it's always fun when new people like come to our event for the first time and I'm like, "How?" And they're like, "Oh, that's good, but man, that's a long ride."
It's a long ride.
And I'm like, "Yeah, now you understand why I only make like 2 events a year."
And we have to make it every time for every event. But going out east, we were spoiled. Like I've said before, I felt like you could go to an event every single weekend within 3 hours, within like a 3 or 4 hour driving distance. It was
I remember
nuts.
Sir Anastasia, who lives in Southern California,
She's
I don't
SoCal,
remember,
yeah.
saying that it's not worth her time to travel more than an hour, I think it was, to go to hit an event with less than 100 people.
Which is a bizarre concept.
We
to us.
often don't get events with 100 people.
Right. It's cool when we get over.
Oh, yeah,
100
it's great.
people. Like when I first hit my first event that was like over 1,000 people, I was stoked. It was.
I think my biggest number is still only like 700. Like I've never hit over 1,000.
There was a Battle for the Ring that was over 1,000, and then Ockfest.
Yeah.
And then pretty sure that. Ragnarok was absolutely.
It's just before Christmas when we're recording this, and I keep getting people lately being like, "Are you going to Battle for the Ring?" I'm like, "That's over 1,000 miles for me. Like, I'd love to, but
We like to. It's such a financial commitment for us because I mean we're old enough at this point that like in our early 20s, we could drive down there in a single sitting, and do the overnighter thing. And get there, set up, pass out for a few hours, and then get right to it. We're not that spry anymore. We have to get a hotel halfway through and probably take our time the next day. And you want to eat a bit more than just jerky and Cheez-Its on the road, and so there's more of a financial commitment.
Well,
now that I'm an old fogey.
I'm getting married in June. I have very limited time off, and
Right,
that is
there's that
a
too.
lot of like time and effort to do, which is too bad. I love it. I want to go again, but whew.
Yeah, I plan to make it again, but just when we can make a trip out of it. But,
Yeah.
So I totally understand when they're like, why would we be able to come north? It's like, we're not even offering a gigantic event.
No, we're
like that.
offering like maybe 50 people.
So if you're just coming up for that, like I've met, there's been several people who've come up and they've done it as like a part of a bigger summer trip where they've come up and they've hit the War of the Gate, which is our quote unquote big event of the year, and then they'll hit Glacier National Park and then Yellowstone National Park, and they'll make like a Montana trip out of it.
Yeah, people have a lot of fun when they do that, but we don't get a lot of them doing that.
No. But that makes it more worth it for people who are traveling as far as some people have to travel. But this is to say that linking ground is important, even if you're taking it for granted. Even if you're in a place where there's a lot of realms around, it still pays to be in good with the people who are around you, not just for that exchange of bodies and support for when you're doing an event, they show up, and when they're doing an event, you show up. But also, if you find yourself on the field, and I know there's been several times where I've been the only Stygian at an event.
Yeah.
And then Wrath will be like, hey, just come fight with us. That's partially due to the fact that we have a good relationship between our two realms.
Every time that I've been to Battle for the Ring, which is my big long distance one, that's why I keep mentioning it, we've done the Montana-Idaho Alliance, because
Right.
neither one had quite enough people to really be like noteworthy alone.
But together we were okay.
And we roughly knew what the other person was going to do.
Right, similar style. And that same idea, a good way that goes toward this linking is to have units that span multiple realms. I know that the Brotherhood of the Falcon is a strong linking point between here and Wrath. Gelf is as
Yeah,
well.
we have a lot of people in Wrath, and then we have a lot of people in Oregon, and Wrath kind of serves as the like center of the empire.
The crux,
Yeah.
if it were. Yeah. One of those awkwardly timed moments where I was taking him my vape, he was taking a drink of water. Nobody was there to fill the dead space.
We're super majestic at this job.
Majestic. So that's the linking ground. Not so much of that for the... trying to think of it for 40K, and I think I would just be stretching it. I think it goes into the same idea as keeping things together in your bubbles. Make sure that when everything's close together like that, when you're bordered, that everything stays bubbled. You're going to be fine. The next type of ground that we're talking about is significant ground. Now, significant ground, like it says, is you're deep in hostile territory. Sun Tzu advises that you should plunder, but also protect your supply train. And we're not walking to battle with a bunch of backpacks and bedding, so the supply train is, again, a bit more of an abstract for us here.
Yeah, that'd be like stealing someone's stuff on the side of the field, and don't
do that. That's not the plunder we're talking about.
That's the exact opposite of the lesson of this episode.
We were talking at the beginning about being a good community member. Don't jack people's stuff.
Anyway, sorry.
Part of that. So deep in hostile territory, we tend to think of this as a flanking maneuver. And so I think we've explained what flanking is. It's like the oblique is what they talk about it in classical warfare. We call it flanking in modern wargaming. The same idea for 40K. Plunder, it means to take advantage of the opportunities presented to you. If you've got backs, or if you've got the ability to disrupt your enemy's formation, or the enemy's momentum, or their line, or whatever's going on, this is what we call by plunder. It's not necessarily taking their stuff, but taking their battlefield edge, taking their initiative away from them would be the plundering. But also protecting your supply train, which is to say, maintaining your connection with the rest of the army. Do not become so disconnected that you can be easily wrapped up and dealt with because there isn't enough pressure on the other side.
Don't abandon your archers.
Don't abandon your archers. Don't abandon your spears.
Yeah. Yeah. As a spearman, please stop doing that.
So, but in this significant ground, obviously, so it's a high risk, high reward kind of thing. And so to be best, again, the supply train is to say protect your connection to the rest of the army. Do not get too far separated that you cannot support them and they cannot support you. And then to plunder, which is to say, like I said, take advantage of the opportunities presented to you by your situation. In this same idea that there's a high risk, high reward situation is difficult ground. And this is ground that is hard to cross. Sun Tzu says to march through and just to press forward. I would say that we take this one literally. The difficult ground is literally just difficult ground. It's very hilly. It's got holes. It's got a bunch of brush or grass or trees or something that makes it difficult to move in, difficult to cross.
We've been using the same field for 15 years now.
Right.
And I know exactly where the little divot on the ground is. And I know to be real careful about fighting there because of the number of people I've seen sprain their ankle right there. That is difficult ground.
Even if you know about it.
Yeah.
You have knowledge of the terrain, but the ground is still difficult. Muddy ground, if there's been a part of the field that's been particularly tore up by hard fighting, that can be difficult ground just because of footing issues.
That's a lot of fun as a spear when you're like, I need to get out of here, and suddenly you're flat on your back because mud.
Yeah, backpedaling through mud, that's a singular experience. But yeah, so just try to get out of it as quickly as possible is what Sun Tzu is saying here. In terms of 40K, perhaps it would be ground, if you're a melee army, it would be ground that is directly in front of the shooting portion of your enemy's line. So it's that last bit of difficult ground that you need to get through before you're to them. Press forward, again, don't hesitate. If you got Gene Stealers, you got Orcs, the whole point is to get into melee combat, so try to get into melee combat. That's the difficult ground. That one's pretty easy too. Constricted, again, the name implies, and it's got narrow access, but you got to use cunning in this situation and block access points and exits.
Bridge battles.
Yeah, bridge battles, castles that have a very any
kind of protective wall that is in the middle of your fight.
Anything that creates a choke point, where the field is narrower than it is anywhere else, it's constricted. Again, this one's very literal, and you want to make sure that you control the access points and the exits for it. That's very important. Otherwise, use cunning. Also pretty easy. That one's literal. Don't have to go into a whole lot of abstract for that. Desperate is the last one. Also fairly literal. And this is when you're fighting for your life. And the advice is to just fight. The only choice is between life and death, and the only way to achieve life is to win. So you have to fight to be able to do that. We talked last episode about motivating your troops, making sure they're in the right headspace to quote-unquote die. That motivation to go in there and meet with it. So I don't think we're going to beat that one too bad today. And that one can be done anywhere. That's when your back is to the edge of the world, when you've been surrounded by the enemy, when you're totally outnumbered, totally outclassed. That's desperate.
Yep.
Any of it and all of it can be desperate.
Go down swinging, and if you don't go down, even better.
That's right. There's been a lot of situations, and I only escaped from it because I resolved that I was going to die there, but I was going to die well. I was going to die with a flourish. Cat, I swear to heaven, you gotta behave yourself. We're going to institute martial law around here. I ain't playing. Okay. Those are the types of ground.
Yeah.
And how best to use them. So the rest of the chapter, I would just kind of sum up in this idea of the snake of Changshen, and I probably butchered that, so somebody please tell me how to pronounce that. But when he's talking about this in the chapter, it's the snake with two heads. So if you strike one head, the other head hits you. If you strike that head, then the previous head will hit you, and if you hit in the middle, both heads hit you. So how do you defeat this snake? You want to be like the snake in war. And the ways you do that, he has a couple of pointers that I just wanted to go over real quick before we get to Mr. Frederick the Great. And if he's got a great after his name, he must be.
That's how it works.
That's how it works.
Yeah.
That's how it works.
He actually did this time. But.
Yeah, he was pretty cool. At least when it came to military tactics, he definitely wrote the book, as it were. So when we're talking about this idea of the two-headed snake, see something they value as part of this. Whether that's a position on the field in relation to something they value, so charging their archers is typically a good way to distract your enemy, because a lot of people will stop what they're doing to defend their archers. You don't want your archers getting killed. A place on the field could be an objective. The bell, in a game of Ring the Bell.
The king.
Or the king, the flag. Something they value. Make sure that you control it so that they have to change their behavior to come back and get it from you.
Mm-hmm.
And a good way to do this is the next point, is speed. Catching them unprepared, moving unexpectedly, and attacking where they're not fortified. These are all ideas that have been covered in previous chapters. As the speed is doing the least amount of effort. It doesn't necessarily have to be the fastest. A lot of the swings that I do, and my students will be like, you're so fast, and I'm like, I'm not actually moving that quick. I've just eliminated the useless movement. I start with my sword here, and then I use body mechanics to just drop the blade. There's no wind up, there's no pull back. It's like that 6-inch punch that Bruce Lee talks about.
Yeah, I describe it as being a very lazy fighter, actually.
Yeah.
I'm a very lazy fighter. The less I have to move to kill you, the better.
And you should be.
Yeah.
You should be. If you have to be out there all day in armor, sweating it against other nerds, you want to be. It's economy of motion, economy of force. So speed, again, doesn't necessarily have to be fighting faster. It's just fighting smarter, fighting lazier.
Yeah.
What you were saying. Uniting the troops in courage. That's the next thing. Making sure that your team is united in courage. And in this particular case, courage doesn't necessarily have anything to do with cowardice or anything like that, unless we're talking about what they were talking in the previous chapter, where courage is the motion towards the enemy and cowardice is motion away from the enemy. If you're united in courage, this is the idea of keeping the line together, maintaining that unified front. Everybody's moving in the same direction. They've got the same objective in mind. This isn't left, right. This is, but it's more than just a rabble.
Yeah.
More than just a rabble. Being united. The intelligent use of terrain. Again, this idea of force multiplier. I've got it in all caps. I should have underlined it with like 4 exclamation points after it. Use any force multipliers that you can that are afforded to you, your environment. Those are advantages you cannot afford to pass up. And then this one's more social. Keeping tight-lipped and being unpredictable is something that he advises. And there has been many a time in my Bellegarth career where I have been talking to a friend. And I figured what I was saying was in confidence, but I maybe talked about something that was going on with my unit, either a battle plan that we had or an internal weakness that was present. This was all in my earlier career, by the way. If the Dark Angels are listening, I've learned how to be a good secret agent since then.
But like, oh, we're gonna hit so and so hard, or like,
Right.
oh, they're having trouble fighting archers, or whatever.
But the only way that two people can keep a secret is if one of them is dead, is what it amounts to. I'm not saying that was not advice to kill your friends.
Do not kill your friends.
Unless it's an assassin tournament, then you should absolutely kill your friends. Or you both said lay on and agreed
Yeah, then
to
it's
it,
okay.
then you should kill your friends. But not with live steel. And so don't share your plans. And also this idea of being unpredictable. If your team always does the same thing, or if you as a person always do the same moves, people are going to notice. People are going to find the pattern, and they're going to learn how to defeat you just by being one step ahead of you. So maintaining this unpredictability, if you are a line fighty unit, maybe in secret practice wolf packing and break out some wolf packing and surprise people because they're not used to seeing that. Or if it's the reverse, if everybody's used to seeing you wolf pack and work in small groups, practice coming together in a line, and nobody's going to know what to do with it because they're not used to seeing a line.
Yeah, oh my god, a Stygian line would be hilarious.
It would be hilarious, and I think it would be highly effective.
On a smaller note, like even just with your own fighting, you can look at it too, of if you always open with a, left side chop,
Right.
I'm going to know to like, okay, I'm fighting so-and-so, they're going to do their left side chop, I can block right here, and that gives me more room to like experiment and play, or like respond to it faster.
Right.
At the same time, if you notice that you're doing left side chop, toss to the right instead, and they'll be like, oh, he's gonna do a lefty chop again, and you can shake stuff up, and I've gotten kills that way, convincing them that, oh, I always start with this.
And then, doing it, but not actually intending to follow through and move into something else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're sparring a person, say 10 times, and the first 3 times you always open with the same shot, 4th time open with something else, and there's a chance they'll be prepped for that first shot instead.
Right. Well, yeah, everybody wants to notice patterns. So be unpredictable, and you can outthink that. And being unpredictable, you first have to understand the way other people think, which brings us to the next point that Sun Tzu makes in this part of the chapter, which is understanding the priorities of nobles. Again, something we've talked about on this show before, but think of the nobles as the movers and shakers at any particular event, realm, or unit. These are people who influence the way that other people behave, think, or game.
It can even just kind of be the unit personality itself.
Or even, just the unit personality itself. Knowing the general build of a person who is in a general unit.
The BOF is going to BOF, the EBF is going to EBF, the GELF are going to do whatever sounds interesting at the time. But you can predict what we're going to do based off of...
If you got the familiarity.
To an extent, yeah.
Not exactly, but understanding the priorities of each unit, why they fight, who they enjoy fighting, who they're good at fighting. These are good things to know in terms of trying to predict what they're going to do and using it to your advantage. Understanding terrain. In Warhammer 40k, this is absolutely literal. You need to review the terrain section of the rulebook and know what each of the terrain pieces does and how your units relate to them. It's very important to keep up with that in the meta because that is a huge part of how we play the game and how the units interact with each other on the board. But it's also true in Bellegarth, understanding principles of fighting uphill versus downhill, in wooded areas, not wooded areas, all the things we've been talking about on this show. It's absolutely critical. And it's a good part of being this snake, this idea of being able to strike from whatever angle is your opponent is weak. And the last point that he presses on here was something we were kind of talking about before. But it's the idea of a meritocracy, which is the exact opposite of nepotism. So a meritocracy is where people get what they deserve, where people are awarded things as they are deserving, where they have merit. Whereas nepotism, people get things because of their closeness to power. In nepotism, I select somebody for a lieutenant position, not because I think they'd make a good lieutenant, but because they're my buddy, and I want to hook them up, and I want to say, okay, now you get to come to unit meetings because I just want to hang out with my buddies. As opposed to this person has worked really hard for it, this person has really strived. I may not agree with everything they say, but people respect them, and they'd be a good
They're
asset.
working for the good of the group every
Right.
time, too.
Right. So that's a meritocracy, and that always works better. People would far prefer following an officer that they believe in over an officer that just got it because they knew somebody. I've seen units break apart or suffer schisms because of nepotism, because people didn't feel like somebody got what they deserved. This idea of justice, everybody craves justice, especially when it comes to them.
Kind of happened in 19th century Europe a lot.
Yeah,
Like,
what do you mean?
when you can just buy your own rank, suddenly,
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Well, and
it started becoming a problem.
that actually is. It's interesting you say that because that's a good segue into our battle. Do you have anything else you want to say on the chapter before we get into our battle?
No, I think we're good, man. Like, let's teach me about this great man.
So, this
probably
Frederick
good.
the Great, for those who have not necessarily read about him, he was a Prussian general. Now, Prussia was a small country. Think about the area of like Poland, Ukraine, like Lithuania, like that kind of area, Eastern Germany,
Yeah,
Prussia.
they were devastatingly good army for a long time.
Excellent army, excellent political advantages. You can imagine being there between Russia, which was the political powerhouse at various times throughout history, and then the rest of Europe. They had a great position, and they used it very well. And in this particular case, we're dealing with the 1700s, 1757. And this battle is taking place in Leuthen. And it's been, like I said, sorry, I just zoned out again. Oh, it's been a long day. Thumbs has had a long day. I've been up since like 3 this morning.
Yeah, I'm ready for a nap.
We appreciate you all dealing with us. You got something to say real quick? I wanted to put a stimulant in my brain.
Apparently not.
What do you got? What's a question? Do I got framing questions?
Okay, so Prussia's this. Who are they fighting? Sorry.
That's a good question. So they're going against Austria, and on the one side you've got Frederick the Great, who he may have come from a noble family, but he wasn't a person who studied military science early on in his youth. He wasn't obsessed with it, but after he became a ruler and had to do it, he showed a extreme aptitude for it. Whereas on the other side, you had the kind of exact opposite. You had Prince Charles of Lorraine and the Count Leopold Joseph von Dohn. And both of these fellows had their positions because of their relationships to people in power. Prince Charles was the prince, as his name implies.
Yeah, it's going to get you a rank.
He was, he was put into the position because of who he was related to. Now, the time period that we're talking about, this is during the 7 Years' War. You might say, 7 Years' War? That sounds familiar as an American. It should, because this is the same 7 Years' War that was taking place in the United States, that was occurring between France and Britain at the time.
Yeah.
It was like the French Indian and Britain. But on the continent, it was the lines that had been drawn were France and Austria versus Prussia and Britain. Now, it started as an effort to break the British dominance of the Atlantic trade routes.
That did not work.
No, not so much at the time. But that was the aim of it, was to kind of disrupt that, because the British were all over the place, colonizing, expanding their economy. And so France and Austria wanted to get in on the action, and they wanted to disrupt what Britain was doing. So this comes in the midst of that time of conflict.
This is still mostly like muskets and cannon fire, like combat. Yeah.
Yep, we're dealing with not a whole lot of very sophisticated weaponry, not swords and shields, but no automatic or even semi-automatic weaponry to speak of at this point.
Britain's into its redcoats phase.
Very much into its... Again, this is just before the American Civil War.
Revolutionary War.
Yeah, that one.
It's way before the Civil War.
100 years before the Civil War. I'm really tired if I'm messing up that date. Oh, man. So, Frederick was a master at using these force multipliers that we're talking about, and the numbers that were taking place here kind of reflect that. He had about 33,000 troops, whereas the Habsburgs had 66,000. So we're talking about a 2-to-1 advantage. And when you're dealing with projectiles and cannons, that can be a huge issue.
Yeah.
But in this particular case, Frederick manipulated the battlefield to his advantage, but he didn't have any fine choke points. This wasn't an idea like Thermopylae where there was like a narrow pass and he used it. He used hills. This area around Leuthen is deceptive. It's a lot like, for us, it would be like Wyoming or eastern Washington or eastern Montana, where you would call it quote-unquote flat.
But it's not very flat.
But it's not actually flat because of the hilliness of it. You could actually hide a fairly good-sized force in one of those little dells, one of those little nooks or crannies, and you wouldn't be able to see them until you're right on top of them.
Yeah.
So that was the nature of the land here as well. You're dealing with some very hilly land, and the weather was foggy on the 5th of December. So Frederick, he leads a leaves a diversionary force on the Austrian right, and makes sure that it's in a visible spot. But he starts to deploy the bulk of his forces toward Leuthen. So this is toward the Austrian left. And now the diversion is moving up, but Frederick is kind of shifting the force over, and it cannot be seen. Again, we're talking about these hills blocking the line of sight just right. Now, the prince commits to it. He commits to this diversion. He gets really focused on it. We're talking about a single column of cavalry out of a whole army. He's got this one single column of cavalry that he can see, and he is just fixated upon it.
Those ones.
That's where he's coming from. That's what's happening. Now, he made some really key mistakes in making this assumption. Before we go in, I want to give you some spoilers. He had no patrols out.
What?
No patrols to look at where the enemy was or what they were doing.
Like, I have never fought in this style of combat in my life and never will, and even I'm like, no, but, like...
Even you would probably put out some reconnaissance.
Right,
patrols.
like, hey, Bob, go see what's behind that tree.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Bob died. Okay, they're behind the tree.
Or in this case, what's behind that hill.
Yeah.
It turned out to be a very important piece of information that they were lacking. They had also no pickets. So which, you know what a picket is? A picket is like a forward deployed point that is like a defensive...
Yeah, it's kind of like a rally point.
Or like a scout. It's like a scout or an advance listening post,
Yeah.
or just something that's out ahead of your troops that says, oh, hey, somebody's coming.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. No pickets. There were no pickets out.
So
either.
he was doing zero work on the actual prep part, being like, it's okay, we have 3 times the bullets.
And this is all this was not new. Frederick was not new to war. He had been, this conflict had been going on for a while. He had fought in several engagements at this point. He had made a bit of a name for himself, and he was known for mixing it up. He was known for diversions. He was known for feints.
You're saying he was unpredictable.
I'm saying that he was predictable in his unpredictability.
Okay.
So the fact that you could clearly see this single column of cav...
You should be able to be like, well, something's not right here.
Yeah, there should have been a 2-in-1 kind of equation occurring. But no, Prince Charles just kind of goes into this assuming that because he's got double the numbers, he's going to win. Fixates on this group of cav, and even when the nature of the situation starts to materialize, he doesn't adjust his plan until it's too late. So these are the key issues that he deals, or the key mistakes that he's making in this battle.
The key issues he's failing to deal with.
Suddenly there's an army on his left. Again, he's been fixated on this cavalry unit, this single column on his right. Suddenly there's an army that has popped up on his left, and Austria tries to respond, but it's too late. Frederick is already moving, and they talk about this one hill. There's a hill that Frederick takes at one point that was kind of overlooking, and if he hadn't taken this hill, he probably wouldn't have won the battle, but because he put his guns up on top of this hill, seized it.
They've got all this extra range. It's harder to hit them.
They've got fields of fire on the entire Austrian forces, and that overfire can be huge, especially when you're dealing with fairly inaccurate musket fire. Having cannon fire raining down on top of you, that encourages people to leave.
Yeah.
In one way or another, whether it's body bag or
multiple body bags.
Multiple body bags or on foot in a rapid fashion. So yeah, it ended poorly. Everything got wrapped up. Frederick added another notch to his belt, and the Battle of Leuthen went very much in Prussia's favor. Massive losses for the Habsburg side, because again they just weren't prepared. They weren't prepared to deal with it. So what did they do here? They used the ground to their advantage. Like we said, the diversionary force that moved behind the hillocks. Now, some pickets or some patrols may have also changed the tide
they had
of this
advantages.
somewhat. But being able to lead this diversionary force and use that terrain to your advantage and reposition to be on your opponent's weak side, that was huge. Frederick was known for it. The fact that Prince Charles couldn't figure that out and say, you know what, he's known for repositioning and hitting people on the flank. Maybe, just maybe, he'll do it again.
That sounds like crazy talk.
You know, it was crazy. Right up until it wasn't. And then it very much wasn't. All right, so that's the Battle of Leuthen. Any questions?
Exciting.
Like I said, we know how the 7-year war ended, because they didn't perpetuate it. There was a massive tax debt that was then passed on to America, and America wasn't pleased about that, and had themselves a little tea party, and yeah.
Next thing you know, the Hamilton musical happens.
God, I have to see that. Like, there was a song that came up on one of my PlayStations, or my playlists, the other day, and I haven't actually heard anything from Hamilton yet, and I was listening to it, I was like, I actually have to probably listen to this.
I've been telling you that for like 3 years.
I know, I'm slow. I didn't want to listen to Repo for the longest time, and then I actually, like, it was Turkey Feathers, he was playing Repo, the Genetic Opera, on his radio,
like, what is this?
On the way back, and I'm like, this is gorgeous, what is this? And he's like, it's that movie I've been trying to get you to watch. I told you.
Well, Hamilton's coming to Spokane next spring, so they're coming actually. I mean, it's not the original cast.
Right.
But like,
still, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. My dad saw it.
Check that out.
He didn't stop talking about it every time I saw him for a while after that.
I believe it. All right. Well, I think that's our show for the day. I think that sums up my thoughts on the chapter. Next week, we're going to be talking about attacking with fire. And again, probably not literal fire in the case of Belagarth.
No, please, no.
Toto, I still remember the cloak that was ruined. Don't think I've forgotten. Speaking of attacking with fire. But, so that's what we're doing next week. Just wanted to give a shout out to our parent company again, Nightmare Box Presents, for doing all the things they do. Brett and Kristen are amazing, and they work exceptionally hard. Kristen's got her own YouTube and site that you can go to, where she's got her movie The Dolls up, among other things. Brett has his book The Madman Diaries, and he's also working on a couple other things as well, so keep them in mind. They're over there at Mistakes Were Made is their podcast. I highly recommend, if you're an artist of any stripe, to check them out and to laugh and learn with Brett and Kristen.
Yeah. And, if you enjoyed us, the best thing you can do to help us is like our page, subscribe to our podcast, review it, good or bad. Let us know how we're doing.
Please, yeah.
And tell your friends about it. Like, it sounds trite because every podcast does it, but really, it is the most helpful thing you can do is get one more person to listen.
Absolutely. I mean, the second we can monetize this, the second I can get better equipment, I can get a better recording space.
We could have 2 microphones.
Start going to events, doing event coverage, getting you guys some good on the ground. Yeah, you feel where I'm going with this? So,
yeah, we feel we're going.
Hook us up. Thumbs also has a podcast that he does.
I recently, with a couple of friends of mine, started a new podcast network called Earworm. It's like earworm, but with V's. It's kind of silly, but whatever. You can listen to my podcast there called General Nerdery with Zach and Tyler. I'm Zach, by the way. You might not know that we haven't used that name. But it's just two guys talking about liking things. So I think if you enjoy this, you would probably enjoy that.
Most likely. So give that a check out as well. You can check us out. I try to maintain the Instagram. You would not believe how hard it is to do a creator Instagram account until you try to do one.
I cannot get it to team up with my Facebook page.
I'll try to show you how to do that.
Okay.
There's a little setting thing you can do there. But we are at Art of War Gaming Podcast there at Instagram. You can email me. I would love to hear any thoughts, criticisms, concerns, ideas for new shows, ideas for topics. Heck, just to say hi. You can email us at artofwargamingpodcast@gmail.com. We're on Facebook, The Art of War Game. Remember, please, to go and vote. We've got where we're going next. Remember, we're doing the voting on the books, and you get to choose. I've got it here somewhere. We've got Strategy by B.H. Liddell Hart, The Art of War by Machiavelli, On War by Clausewitz, and The Military Maxims of Napoleon are the choices for our next book. So please go to our Facebook page and make sure that you vote in that. Give us your feedback. And yeah, I think that's it.
All right.
Well, for this week, this has been Yagamalark.
And I'm Thumbs.
Signing off.